I don't want to suck.
I want to suck your blood.
Hey guys, it's Amy here, back again with another video.
Happy Hallows Eve, mortals.
Today I'm dressed as a vampire portrayed in the one way that they should be portrayed.
As a threat.
You would not want to date this. And because every single author tuber ends up talking about this kind of stuff this time of year, I'm gonna join in as well. We're talking villains. Comment below how many villain-themed videos you have watched this month. Villains are very hit or miss for me. You either get a villain that is an absolute icon or a villain that is about as much threat as a teddy bear. The media has a very strange obsession with softening villains and humanizing them. Even the big bad evil guys and final bosses. I am tired of the advice that villains have to be sympathized with all the time. Today we're gonna be fixing that. We are gonna be building a villain the way that they are meant to be built. Here are 7 tips for writing a villain. A real villain. Number 1, make them a threat. The most obvious tip out there, of course, needs to come first. Your villain needs to pose as a threat and have a significant edge against the protagonist. You can be ballsy and have it be exactly what the character is weak to, but there are other ways to work around it. Magic or fighting prowess is the obvious one in the right genres, but for something like contemporary it can be harder to find. For that kind of situation you can use social positions, privileges, and abundance of resources as a way to be a threat against your protagonist. And however you are making your villain threatening, it needs to be significantly threatening. The balance between your hero and your villain needs to be unfair, with the villain having the upper hand. May the odds be never in your favor. Number 2, have them present. With this threat, we need to see people suffering from it. We need to see the villain in action. It is not enough to simply describe or illustrate how bad your evil villain is. They need to be present and doing stuff in your story at some point for the readers to truly believe it. Personally, this is where I truly start to love villains. When I see these villains doing their deeds and wreaking havoc on their world in their own special ways, that's when I truly start to see them in their prime and absolutely loving them. I just step away and go, oh wow. Let's say in your standalone novel you have a villain or a force of villains. Their presence needs to be felt at least 3 times before the climax. And at least one of these times prior, their dastardly deeds must come to fruition and be successful. This would be ideally right before the breaking point, because nobody is going to believe that these villains can be stopped otherwise. Number 3, oppose them to the protagonist. Boy, I just love the drama when things get personal. Having a villain with a selfish need to take over the world is okay and all, but when a villain creates a personal strike against the main character, that is when things get really, really juicy. You will never know how bad a situation actually is until you are directly affected by it. It literally happens a bunch during history. Just like my pessimism that we're not going to be able to solve climate change until climate change actually happens. It doesn't necessarily have to be a personal vendetta, but in the middle of the fight, or the battle, or the harrowing stuff going on, the protagonist needs to be directly affected by the actions of the villain. Then we will be able to truly understand how big and bad the scale of the villain's plans are actually. And if it happens repeatedly, this just shows how ruthless that villain is. Number 4, give them motivation. Why does your villain do their shit?
Because they're evil!
Yeah, but why are they evil?
Evil!
Your villain doesn't mean anything without having a reason for them to do their evil shit. Like any other character, they need a good enough motivation beyond the path of good and the path of evil. Motivations for a villain are more often than not a goal that they work towards, because your villains are the most active characters in the entire narrative. These can be the same goals that your protagonist or hero seeks, or they can be ones that the protagonist wants to just stop. But the key for making it a villain, somebody to be hated, is that even though they may have the same goals, the path towards that goal will be what is corrupt. Number 5, show personality. This one is a given, but sadly not enough times. Your villain must have a personality like all other characters, one that is not just described by the evil things that they do. You can have a villain that is a cheery optimist but does bad things to bad people. You can have a dark and broody villain. Or you can have my favorite kind of villain, one who is an absolute charmer. And for that you kinda hate him. I don't know why I said him. There needs to be more like charmer villain females, ones that are not sexualized. Because what makes a person bad is not always how they behave. It is the decisions that they make and the consequences that those decisions make. And of course, what their thoughts on them are. Hell, you can even make it a textbook cartoon villain as long as they're a decent threat and have a presence. And goals. Number 6, spare deterioration. Your villains should never be put down to the point where it nulls the fact that they are a threat, especially if and when these insults and other deteriorations are true. Your villain should never be an easy target. Nothing should ever be easy when you're interacting with the villain, because otherwise they just become a life-sized dummy. If it is easy, that must mean they have been planned and they're gonna make things difficult thereafter. Because the narrative is about overcoming and obstacles, not decimating their 5-year enemy the first time they reunite. And number 7, your villain is not the good guy. I know this fact sounds stupid, but people are too often framing their villains in a sympathetic light. Tragic backstory. Aw, now I feel sorry for the villain. Wrong thing for a good cause. Aw, they're misguided. This is not the only kind of bad person on the planet. Look, your backstory and your motivation can be considered neutral. But this is only to the point where we can understand why the villain is a villain. The goal for the villain is to keep proving more and more that what they're doing is bad. Keeping on the subject of vampires, one good example is Strahd from the Curse of Strahd 5th edition campaign and Ravenloft setting. Spoilers to anybody who hasn't played it. Much of the Curse of Strahd adventure is understanding his motives and his backstory, but we don't ever sympathize with him because he's just such a bad and corrupt person that there's no use saving him. His deeds constantly overshadow his story. This is a kind of villain that you can understand without completely sympathizing with them. Case closed. And that is how you write a villain. Let me know in the comments your favorite villains. And of course, like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you are new around here. You can ring that bell to find out when I post more videos on writing, books, and digital content for authors. Get my novel, ASTER'S CODA Exposure, in paperback and ebook in the description. Follow Abby Tacker as she faces an otherworldly blood feud after her mother has died, with a definitely ruthless villain. Now be sure to check down below for my Instagram, my Twitter, my book talk, and my website. Stay creative, everybody, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.